Good morning to you all. So nice to see you. If you are here, you are no doubt on a spiritual path. And that is almost the most wonderful thing you can do for yourself, for your loved ones, and for our whole spiritual Sangha here at Unity. You have chosen to be on a path that will help you be happier, more peaceful, have a more abundant existence than most people. It's available to all, but as the Bible says, many are called, but few are chosen, which means that we're all called, but few of us choose to follow the spiritual path. And it baffles me because it seems so simple. It's the way to live a more authentic and meaningful and peaceful and joyful, full life, the spiritual path. But unfortunately, most people just don't know how life-changing it is to be on a spiritual path. Or maybe they do, but they just kind of get sidetracked in life, often until the results of getting sidetracked come back to haunt them. And then some people just don't know how to truly experience the spiritual path. Maybe they get caught up in intellectual concepts about the path that don't really have much to do with the path. The path is experiential. It's about the way we live. The true spiritual path involves a way of life that is above and beyond the material world. So some people just don't think that's possible. They have been programmed somewhere along the line, many of us have, to think that materiality is all there is. If you can't see it and touch it and hear it, it doesn't exist. It's sort of like someone who's never tasted chocolate, they can't even imagine what it is. To them, the taste of chocolate just doesn't exist. Then there are those people, which is all of us sometimes, certainly me, who do want to follow the spiritual path, but we really just don't know how to in all cases. Things come up and we just don't know how to react. Or we fall off the path sometimes, or we are maybe in the habit of just thinking in the same old deep groove, and it's hard to change. But like anything that's worth having, it takes some effort, and it definitely takes commitment, which we're going to look at today. In practical terms, spiritual growth is learning to rise above life's fears, negativity, and suffering, to rise above all that. That's one of the metaphysical interpretations of Jesus' walking on water. Water is traditionally seen as one of the main symbols of the emotions. When we live our lives in a state of Christ consciousness, we walk above many of the unpleasant emotions like fear, negativity, anger, stress, etc., which cause many people, most people probably, to drown. This ability to rise above life's issues and not drown in them is one of the metaphysical meanings of the Noah's Ark story, which I think we all know. We probably learned in Sunday school. Noah lived a good life. He lived a spiritual life. He was committed to his covenant to God. So he was taught how to build an ark and rise above the turbulent waters of life. Whereas those who don't make a deep commitment and keep to that covenant with God, to follow the higher laws and higher wisdom of life, drown. When we are committed to our spiritual path, we are constantly building our inner ark. And that is what helps us rise above life's problems. This is practical spirituality. This is what Unity teaches. So how do we grow spiritually? What is a true spiritual path? The one that leads to freedom from worldly problems and emotions that get most people down. And I don't mean by that we miraculously suddenly don't have any of the same life issues as everybody else. I mean that we just sort of sail through them in our inner arc, so to speak, like a good sailor who uses the winds of life to get it to his destination instead of suffering from those turbulent winds of life, which usually end up tearing apart the sails and overturning the boat for most people. I dare to say that the vast majority of people that we all know are totally dependent on outer circumstances for their peace, joy, and stability. They have no inner arc in which they can rise above life's rough waters. I ran across a kind of poem story this week that really expresses the idea of spiritual growth. It especially kind of caught my interest because the overriding symbol in the poem was potholes. I think we can all relate to that. Last week I was driving around the 7600 block of Oak Street. Maybe some of you know about that. And I could hardly get where I was going for all the potholes. On some blocks, the whole left side of the street or the right side of the street had just sunk 5 or 6 inches, coupled with the plethora of Hurricane Ida trash, trees, and tarps everywhere. It all kind of seemed like some Mideast war zone to me. I felt like I was driving around in one of those dystopian films, and I felt uneasy. It was only upon later reflection that I realized that I had let all those potholes create a negative state in me, and that this is perhaps the state of consciousness that I'm often in, where I let life's issues create potholes in me. I'm not being present. I'm not being conscious of my spiritual path at that moment. I get triggered. Life out there isn't how I was conditioned to think it should be, so I get triggered. Anyway, the pothole poem story is entitled Autobiography of Personal Spiritual Growth by Portia Nelson. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am hopeless. And it isn't my fault. It takes forever to find the way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep pothole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep pothole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. And chapter 5, I walk down another street. So let's unpack that a little. In chapter 1, it talks about how most people go through life. They fall in life's potholes, and they blame the potholes. They feel lost and helpless. The potholes represent, of course, life's issues that we all encounter. The chaos, stress, and suffering is what we endure while we're in those potholes. When we don't commit to and follow a higher path, a spiritual path, we end up falling into a lot of chaos and suffering in our lives. Our lives just don't work. And we keep blaming life that things aren't working. So there's little chance of stopping our suffering when we keep blaming life. That's chapter 1 on the spiritual path. The whole Old Testament talks about this. The Old Testament is full of stories about a vengeful God. This vengeful God is a literary device to explain karma, action, reaction, cause, effect. If we choose to live outside of the ancient laws and wisdom, we bring about suffering and chaos in our lives and probably everybody else's too. Many of the Old Testament stories are about how the laws and wisdom of the universe must be observed, or we will experience suffering. In those allegorical stories, an anthropomorphic God doles out the punishments to everyone. Over 700 I've encountered so far. These are simple stories written for simple, uneducated people of 3,000 years ago. But they are really profound philosophical concepts about the suffering that we cause for ourselves when we don't commit to things like justice, fairness, compassion, forgiveness, understanding, love, the universal truths, and wisdom. For example, we steal or kill, and we go to jail, and we suffer a lot there. Cause and effect, karma. We aren't fair and honest with our friends and business colleagues, and they hate us, and they make our lives miserable. It isn't a vengeful God that punishes us for not living according to truth and wisdom. It's always we who create our lives, and often a lot of suffering. When we commit to seeing life and others through our Christ consciousness lenses, all others, the path of compassion, unity, understanding, and love, things just work out a whole lot better. All spiritual paths say the same thing: Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, Taoist, they all say the same thing, in different ways, of course. The simple people of 3,500 years ago took the Bible literally, and they thought that it was an outside force that was punishing them, a vengeful God, when they didn't live according to truth. But it wasn't an angry, vengeful God or outside force that punished them. They were just not aligning themselves with truth and the higher vibrations of life. So suffering ensued. Noah's Ark, Sodom and Gomorrah, the 40 years of wandering around the desert with Moses, it's all the same story. We deviate from the truth. We don't keep our commitment to the higher or spiritual path, and we create chaos and suffering in our lives. We are drowned by life's issues because we don't handle them correctly. We fall in life's potholes instead of being able to go around them or take a different path, which is the spiritual path. The good thing, though, is that often when we hit rock bottom in terms of chaos and suffering, we then start looking for a way out of the pothole. Scott Peck, I think many of you are familiar with him, he wrote The Road Less Traveled, once said, and I quote, "Our finest moments are most likely to occur when we are feeling deeply uncomfortable, unhappy, or unfulfilled. For it is only in such moments, propelled by our discomfort, that we are likely to step out of our ruts and start searching for different ways or truer answers." So often, when we fall in a pothole and realize how miserable we are, it wakes us up, and we then start on a spiritual path, or we remember to get back on our spiritual path. We then make the commitment. We make our covenant with truth. We make our covenant with God, and we start making the effort to keep that covenant. In the Bible, the chosen ones made that covenant with God, but they later got sidetracked. They started worshiping other gods. Those other gods referred to in the Bible for us can be the gods of ego goals, materialism, power, vengeful relationships, whatever. Remember, after their escape from slavery in Egypt, the chosen ones forgot their covenant with the Lord. They started doubting Moses, the symbol of eternal laws in us, our inner Moses, and they didn't keep their spiritual covenant that they had committed to. Result, they wandered around in the desert for 40 years. We too can wander around the desert of life, our life, when we get off the spiritual path. The desert, the potholes, the waters that covered the earth at that time of Noah's Ark, they all symbolize the same thing, the suffering that we bring upon ourselves when we don't stay on the path of truth and wisdom. The chosen ones of the Bible aren't just the Jews. They are all those who have chosen, the chosen ones, self-chosen, to be on the spiritual path. It's all of us. The Old Testament stories are our stories. When we forget our aim, we too end up wandering around in life's deserts, which are really psychological spaces that are devoid of life. They're dry, they're lacking much of the richness and abundance of the promised land, that land of milk and honey, the symbol of heaven on earth. We cheat ourselves out of our promised land. So how do we know when this has happened? Maybe we aren't happy. Maybe we find ourselves blaming life, blaming other people. Maybe we succumb to prejudice or other types of disunity with God's children on this earth. Maybe we judge others without really understanding their plight. If we're very present, though, maybe we can catch these telltale signs or hints that we have strayed from the spiritual path. What that means is that our ego has taken in worldly programming, and we have let that ego run our lives instead of our divine self, our real self, which has been temporarily forgotten. The antidote to that, to start letting our inner divinity run our lives and not our ego, is to wake up, as was said so many times in the Bible. Just be conscious of what we're doing, and then we can get back on the track. The poem's spiritual step number 2, where we pretend we don't see the potholes, it's our ego self-justifying whatever it's doing, we fall in, and it exemplifies the importance of being very, very present to what we're doing, like Katrina was talking about last week, and not pretending that all is as it should be, being present, being mindful. We need to quit pretending and own up to what we're really doing and what our consciousness is manifesting out there. Because if we don't live by the eternal laws and wisdom of unity, love, and compassion, and we deny it to ourselves, what we're doing and thinking, we really don't have a chance to start letting go of some of our worldly, earthly programming. And that's all it is. It's just these layers of earthly programming, and we just have to let those layers go and get down to who we really are. The surgeon can't take out our appendix if she hasn't first taken an x-ray and determined that it's there. We've got to look and see what's there. Just look at our lives. It's full of hints about our consciousness. Then there's spiritual step number 3. As Britney Spears sang, I love this, "Oops, I did it again." This time we are fully aware of how our consciousness, our actions, and negativity are creating our karma or our lives, but we keep on doing the same old thing out of habit. It's not easy to see and then change our worldly conditioning. We didn't put it there, but it sure is hard to let it go. On this step of the spiritual ladder, however, we start to see how it's our fault that we fell in the pothole. That's important. We know that it was our consciousness, our words, our actions that created the situation that we're in, whatever it is. This is a giant step forward toward accessing our true selves, our inner divinity. This acceptance that our ego and not our inner divinity is being allowed to make our life choices. Spiritual step number 4, the pothole is there, and we see it, and we walk around it. Perhaps someone says something which we feel is kind of a put down, maybe our boss. But instead of getting negative or looking for a chance to retaliate and thus start a mini war that we're going to suffer in and all kinds of chaos, we say to ourselves, noted. John is acting egotistically today and trying to put me down. He must be having a bad day. Noted. And you go on about your business. You may even realize that his words have nothing to do with you. Bottom line, you don't react. You don't react to life. You're starting to live your life at cause and not effect. Then there's spiritual step number 5. You go down another street with no potholes. This is when you don't engage with the negative person at all, at least inwardly. Your consciousness is in a completely different place. You let your inner divinity or your Christ consciousness see and interact with others, all the time. You feel at one with them, no matter how they are manifesting in their probably private hell. There is no competition. They do their thing, and you don't get hooked. If they act up, you just forgive them, for they know not what they do. Maybe you tell them that what they did upset you. Maybe in some cases you may have to remove yourself from certain situations because they're toxic, which is another way to go down a different street. But you are ultimately able to see everyone with your Christ vision, so that it doesn't matter what they do. You ultimately get to the point where you have compassion for their negativity and suffering that made them act that way. That's why they acted that way. That's why we all act that way. At that point, even if they are in your life, your wisdom understands their predicament, and you don't get caught up in their distress. You may even grow to the point where you have compassion for them and their distress. That's what spiritual growth is all about. You don't engage in ego conflicts anymore. You take another path, another road. Maybe you take another path literally, meaning that you don't engage in your old life in some way because it's unhealthy. But whatever is in front of you, you just don't engage and react in the same way. And you're not just going like that. You honestly are feeling that peace and compassion. Either way, you're taking a different path. You commit to a higher level of consciousness. You commit to it. You look at other people and issues who formerly caused you stress and created negativity in you, and you're able to respond with the thought, noted. I know what's happening, but I'm going down a different path of consciousness. The outer situations don't trigger stress and negativity or fear anymore. You do all in your power to make the world better, to make changes that are good, but you don't let the situations drown you in chaos and fear and negativity. Result, you have peace in your life and you don't suffer. You have totally avoided the potholes. The whole spiritual path is about unearthing your inner divinity and shedding some of your worldly programming. It's not you. You don't even need to feel bad about it. Just let it go. It's not you. It got programmed into you. You don't have to become a new person, although that's what the world may see has happened. By nature, you are good. You are divine. You are one with the world and everyone in it and God. You are divine. Thus, when you notice something within you or outside of you that appears to be unlike your Christ nature, you simply meet it with your Christ nature. You see it as it is, rather than as our human mind tells us it is. You strive to meet all things with clear awareness, which is Christ's vision, without judgment and with love and compassion. That's the spiritual path. That's the eternal wisdom. Sure, potholes happen. We all know that. Life's issues arise. But it's not the issues and potholes that are the problem. It's the way we see and handle them. And learning how to approach and deal with them is why you are here today. It's why you take spiritual classes at Unity and elsewhere. It's why you personally engage in your spiritual practice every day, because it reinforces on a constant level your spiritual commitment, your covenant with the higher laws and wisdom, with God. And be patient. Rome wasn't built in a day. But if you commit to your spiritual path every day, then every day your life will get better and better. The same issues just won't seem like potholes anymore. They probably will be to other people, of course, but they won't be potholes to you. Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain and helping others, of course, do the same. And that's when you'll be well on your way to learn to dance. At that point, the autobiography of spiritual growth will be your autobiography. Chapter 1 will be, you walk down the street. There's a deep pothole in the sidewalk. You fall in. You're lost. You're hopeless. You think it's not your fault. It takes forever for you to get out. Chapter 2, you walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. You pretend not to see it and own up to things. You fall in again. You can't believe you're in the same place, but it isn't your fault. Chapter 3, you walk down the same street. There's a deep pothole in the sidewalk. You see it's there. You still fall in. It's a habit. Your eyes are open, though. You know where you are. You know it's your fault. You get out immediately. Chapter 4, you walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. You walk around it. And chapter 5, you walk down another street. You follow the spiritual path. May that soon be your spiritual autobiography. You deserve nothing less.